The Galactic Arena was a spectacle of magnificence, an enormous floating coliseum suspended in the vacuum of space, surrounded by a swirling expanse of stars. Spectators from countless species lined the upper levels of the arena, their eyes locked on the grand tournament below. The air hummed with anticipation. Every year, the tournament was a chance for the galaxy's most powerful and proud species to prove their dominance. But this year, a ripple of confusion spread across the arena. A small human delegation had arrived, their transport ship barely visible in the shadow of the enormous, glistening ships that surrounded the venue. Most of the participants, massive, intimidating beings, had never even seen a human up close. To them, the species was little more than a curiosity, a faint afterthought in the grand cosmic hierarchy. Captain Riley Cross, clad in simple, yet functional combat gear, stepped forward, her eyes sharp, her posture straight. The humans had sent her as their representative, an unlikely diplomat, trained in strategy, survival, and combat. It wasn't arrogance that drove her to seek entry in the tournament, but sheer belief in what humanity could do if given the chance. Riley wasn't just any soldier. She was one of the best humanity had to offer, an expert in unconventional tactics and quick thinking. As she approached the colossal central podium, the HFY Empire's towering representatives, with their scaled, reptilian bodies and imposing presence, looked down upon her with condescension. The HFY Emperor, Ithorvax, sneered. "You wish to compete, human." His voice boomed across the arena, filled with disbelief. His eyes scanned Riley from head to toe, mocking her small frame. "You are no more than a speck of dust in the eyes of the galaxy's great powers. What makes you think you belong here?" The galaxy's most feared and respected species waited for Riley's response. The Lizardkind, known for their brutal physical prowess and centuries of military superiority, had a long-standing tradition of invincibility. They believed in strength above all else, and there was no place for what they considered fragile, weak creatures like humans in the tournament. Riley's gaze remained steady, her expression calm, despite the growing tension in the air. "I'm here because I believe in humanity's ability to adapt," she said, her voice firm, but without aggression. "We're not the biggest, we're not the strongest, but we never stop fighting. If you're willing to give us the chance, you'll see what we're capable of." The Emperor paused, clearly displeased by her directness. The room fell into an awkward silence as the Galactic Council members exchanged glances. They had never entertained such an offer from any species, least of all from humans. Yet, in a moment of rare cosmic diplomacy, they agreed to a single trial. If the humans failed, they would be quietly escorted off the premises, their names forgotten. But if they succeeded, well, that was a thought too unsettling for even the mighty Lizardkind to entertain. The arena's atmosphere thickened with tension as Riley Cross prepared for the first trial. The stands above her were filled with spectators from every corner of the galaxy, their eyes glued to the spectacle. Thousands of beings, some humanoid, others incomprehensible in form, watched with a mix of disbelief and anticipation. The trial was about to begin. Riley stood at the edge of the arena, facing her opponent, a massive HFY warrior named Tizar. Towering over her by nearly 3 meters, his body was a thick, muscular mass of scales and sinew. His claws, curved like blades, glinted menacingly under the arena's artificial lights. His eyes, cold and calculating, bore into Riley, sizing her up like a predator ready to strike. "You've already lost," Tizar growled, his voice deep and rumbling, his tail flicking behind him with deadly precision. "You don't belong here. This will be over quickly." Riley didn't flinch. Her heart raced, not out of fear, but excitement. This was the moment. She'd been in situations like this before, where strength and size didn't matter. Humanity's greatest asset wasn't their brawn, it was their mind. And in the heat of battle, that would make all the difference. A booming voice echoed through the arena, signaling the start of the trial. "Begin." Without hesitation, Tizar lunged, his claws aiming directly for Riley's throat. The audience gasped, anticipating her swift defeat. But Riley had already anticipated his move. She ducked low, rolling beneath the giant warrior's reach, her body moving fluidly with precision honed by years of combat training. Tizar's massive claws slashed through the air, narrowly missing her as she sprang to her feet, immediately darting to the side. She couldn't afford to trade blows with him, not directly. Instead, she focused on mobility and timing. As Tizar turned, his heavy feet thundering across the arena, Riley spotted a weakness: his overconfidence. His size was a weapon, yes, but it also made him slower, more predictable. Every time he missed, he left himself open for a split second, a precious moment in which Riley could strike. With calculated precision, Riley rushed toward the arena's edge, where a pile of heavy metal chains lay in disarray, one of the obstacles designed to test endurance and maneuverability. She grabbed a chain, twirling it with surprising speed and strength, and threw it toward Tizar's feet, wrapping it around his legs. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the chain tangled around the HFY warrior's legs, momentarily tripping him up. Tizar roared in frustration, using all his might to yank the chains free. But Riley didn't give him the time. She used the brief distraction to leap onto his back, her arms locking around his thick neck in a chokehold. Tizar fought, thrashing wildly to dislodge her, but Riley's grip tightened. Her breathing was steady, focused. She wasn't trying to kill him, just to incapacitate him long enough to win. The arena filled with the deafening sound of the crowd as Riley applied pressure, forcing the HFY to the ground with a final twist. Within seconds, Tizar was on his back, gasping for air, his massive body pinned beneath Riley's determination. With one final, triumphant move, she released him. "Yield," she said, her voice calm, yet firm. Tizar, struggling for breath and pride, had no choice. He slammed his fist against the ground in surrender. The arena erupted in a cacophony of shocked gasps and applause. The humans had done it, not by brute force, but by adaptability and ingenuity. Riley stood over the fallen warrior, her chest heaving, sweat trickling down her face. The HFY Emperor, his face a mask of disbelief and rage, leaned forward in his seat. He never expected this. "Impossible," he muttered under his breath. Riley wiped the sweat from her brow and glanced up at the stands, her eyes scanning the bewildered faces of the Galactic spectators. This was just the beginning. The victory in the first trial had sent shockwaves through the arena. The unexpected defeat of the HFY warrior left the crowd murmuring in disbelief, but it was only a fleeting moment. The real test was about to begin. The second trial of the Galactic tournament was unlike any test Riley had ever faced. Gone were the physical challenges. Now, it was time to prove her intellect and strategic prowess against the galaxy's brightest minds. This was where the Lizardkind truly excelled. The trial of minds. A test of logic, strategy, and foresight that had decided the fate of countless civilizations. And this time, her opponent was none other than HFY's renowned tactician, Zockel, a genius whose brilliant mind had outsmarted armies for centuries. Riley stood at a massive circular table, her mind racing. The arena around her had transformed into a virtual battlefield, projected onto the table's surface. The challenge was a war simulation, a massive conflict between two forces on a distant planet, each side vying for control of critical resources. The goal was simple: outwit and outmaneuver the opponent to secure victory. Zockel, towering and calculating, adjusted the black and green scales that covered his muscular arms, his cold eyes locked onto Riley as the battle unfolded. His reputation as one of the galaxy's most brilliant tacticians was well earned. His methods were precise, predictable, and ruthless. The table flickered, and the simulation came to life. On the virtual battlefield, two opposing armies clashed, with Zockel's forces taking the first move, His strategy was swift and ruthless, advancing with perfect coordination. He set up an impenetrable defense, leaving Riley little room to maneuver. It was textbook, exactly what everyone expected. But Riley wasn't like the others. She leaned forward, her brow furrowed in concentration. The challenge wasn't about brute force. It was about understanding patterns, exploiting weaknesses. As Zakel's armies advanced, Riley did not charge headlong into battle. She waited, watched. His strategy was predictable, flawless in its simplicity. But in that simplicity, there was a flaw. Riley's fingers danced across the holographic controls. She began by sending a small, seemingly inconsequential unit to the farthest corner of the battlefield, a diversion that Zakel would never expect. A faint smile tugged at the corners of her mouth as she watched his army chase after it, his forces split. Zakel's gaze flickered with irritation as he observed her move. "A waste of resources," he muttered. But Riley wasn't wasting anything. She'd just baited him. In the chaos of the diversion, Riley quickly repositioned the bulk of her forces. What Zakel had assumed was a misstep was, in fact, a calculated risk. She now had the upper hand. Zakel's face grew more serious. He tried to regroup, countering her move with a tactical repositioning of his own. But Riley's next move was already in motion. With a decisive push, she flanked his forces, catching him off guard. The audience, who had been watching the battle unfold in silence, gasped as the tide of the battle shifted. Zakel's once dominant position on the board crumbled under Riley's unexpected brilliance. The Lizardkind tactician was cornered. Zakel, visibly frustrated, attempted a final desperate move, but it was too late. Riley had outmaneuvered him, and the victory was hers. She leaned back in her chair, letting out a slow breath. "It's not about following the rules," she said quietly. "It's about knowing when to break them." The arena exploded with applause. The humans had done it again, this time with their minds. The HFY Emperor was seething with rage. His empire, which had dominated the tournament for centuries, was being dismantled by a species they had once regarded as insignificant. It was an insult, but one that Riley had no intention of apologizing for. As the stunned silence of disbelief lingered, the final words of the trial echoed in the minds of the audience. Humans are not to be underestimated. The final trial was set on a remote, hostile planet, its surface a chaotic mixture of molten rivers, jagged cliffs, and dark, dense jungles filled with vicious predators, a place where only the strongest and most resourceful could survive. Riley stood at the edge of the starting line, her eyes scanning the treacherous terrain ahead. She could feel the weight of the moment. The entire galaxy was watching, waiting to see if humanity could endure this ultimate test. Her opponent in this trial was none other than Varric, the HFY Empire's elite survivalist. He had survived the most brutal environments the galaxy had to offer, thriving in places where even the hardiest species had perished. His reputation as a living legend was unmatched. His strength, endurance, and instinct were considered peerless. But Riley wasn't afraid. Her small frame, though unassuming, held the fire of determination. She'd been through worse, facing impossible odds, surviving in hostile environments, and outsmarting enemies who underestimated her. This would be no different. A booming voice rang through the arena, signaling the start of the trial. "Begin." Varric bolted forward with terrifying speed, his massive legs eating up the distance between him and the first checkpoint. His strategy was straightforward. Crush everything in his path with sheer force. Rocks crumbled under his feet, and trees splintered as he charged ahead, leaving a wake of destruction. Riley, on the other hand, took a more measured approach. She darted into the jungle, her senses heightened, scanning every sound, every movement. She wasn't going to play Varric's game. The terrain was alive with dangers, hidden traps, massive carnivorous creatures, and hostile plant life. But Riley knew this planet's secrets. She had studied the survival logs and mapped out every potential threat. This wasn't just a race, it was a puzzle, and she had the edge in solving it. Varric's brute force soon led him into trouble. He tripped a hidden snare, a vine trap designed to incapacitate the unwary, and was momentarily tangled. Roaring in frustration, he freed himself, but the delay was enough to give Riley a head start. She had already reached a series of narrow cliffs where the ground sloped sharply downward. She didn't hesitate. Riley began to scale the cliffside with the precision of a trained climber. The craggy rock face was perilous, but her hands and feet found purchase in the smallest crevices. She was nimble, efficient, and most importantly, silent. The HFY's brute strength had its limits, and Riley was going to use every advantage she had. As Riley reached the top, she paused, looking out across the valley. Below, Varric was making his way toward the same ridge, roaring in frustration at the delay. But he was on the ground, moving slower, his heavy armor encumbering him in the thick, uneven jungle. Riley's eyes narrowed. This was her moment. The next checkpoint lay across a chasm, the only bridge a thin, rickety rope suspended high above a river of molten lava. Varric would charge straight ahead, but Riley had something better in mind. She made a calculated move, setting a series of small charges along the cliffs, just enough to create a small avalanche. Rocks tumbled down the side, blocking Varric's path. The explosion echoed through the valley, and the debris piled up, forcing him to take a detour. Riley didn't wait to see the aftermath. She ran toward the rope bridge, her heart pounding in her chest. She'd been trained for moments like this, precise, calculated, and relentless. The lava below swirled in ominous red waves, but she didn't falter. With one swift motion, she leaped across the chasm, her fingers gripping the rope tightly. Halfway across, the bridge swayed violently. Riley's legs burned from the exertion, but she kept her focus, ignoring the terrifying drop below. She reached the other side, and without missing a beat, sprinted toward the final checkpoint. The finish line was in sight, but she could hear Varric's booming footsteps behind her. She was close, so close. As she approached the final stretch, Riley glanced over her shoulder. Varric was nearly there, his face twisted in a mixture of rage and disbelief. But it didn't matter. Riley was already crossing the finish line, her victory certain. Victory, human captain Riley Cross. The voice boomed across the arena. The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers deafening. Riley collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. She had done it. The final trial was over. She had survived the deadliest test the galaxy could offer, and she had outlasted the might of the HFY Empire. Varric stood at the base of the cliff, his pride shattered, glaring up at her. But Riley didn't look back. She had won, not by strength, but through her resilience, intelligence, and unyielding will. The cheers in the arena were deafening as Riley Cross stood victorious, her chest heaving, sweat dripping from her brow. She had done what no one thought possible, defeated the best of the best, using nothing but her wit, her strength, and an unshakable belief in humanity's potential. For a brief moment, the galaxy watched in stunned silence before erupting into applause, the sound deafening. Riley's heart pounded in her chest, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of what she had just achieved. She had proven humanity's worth on a scale no one could ignore. But as the cheers roared, she caught a glimpse of something far more unsettling. The Emperor of the HFY Empire, Vax, was staring at her with eyes full of something darker than mere defeat. It wasn't just anger. It was fear. The Emperor slowly rose from his throne, his scaly hands clenching into fists at his sides. The room fell into a heavy silence once more. Riley stood tall, meeting his gaze without flinching. She had earned her place here, and she was ready for whatever came next. The HFY Emperor's voice echoed through the arena, rich with venom and disbelief. This is a travesty. How could a weak, insignificant species like humans outperform the mightiest of us? His words seethed with contempt, but beneath that rage was something more dangerous, the seeds of a conspiracy being born. The Galactic Council, previously neutral, began to murmur among themselves. Riley had earned respect from many, but her unexpected victories had unsettled the established order. The Lizardkind Empire had ruled the tournament for centuries, and now humanity had risen above them. It was an affront to everything they believed in, an existential threat that could destabilize the entire galaxy's power structure. Before Riley could react, the Galactic Council's chairwoman, a neutral figure who had overseen the tournament for eons, stepped forward. Her voice was calm, yet edged with the weight of authority. Humanity has proven itself capable. You've passed every trial set before you, Captain Cross. But the question remains, what is the cost of your victory? Riley straightened, her voice steady. The cost. We never stop fighting, no matter the odds. If that's what's unsettling you, then it's the truth. The chairwoman's gaze softened, but her eyes flickered with concern. No, Captain. You misunderstand. The cost is not personal. It is galactic. Your victory has set in motion a chain of events no one could have foreseen. Riley's brow furrowed as the words hung in the air. What did she mean? Was there more at play than just the competition? The silence in the room deepened, and Riley realized the stakes were much higher than she had anticipated. Emperor Itharvax let out a low, rumbling laugh. The galaxy is not ready for your kind, human. Your victory is a fluke, a one-time anomaly. But mark my words, this will not end here. Riley clenched her fists, her eyes narrowing. She had come this far, but the journey was only beginning. The Essejar Emperor's words were chilling, but they weren't enough to deter her. Humanity had faced worse and still prevailed. She wouldn't back down now. As the Emperor's words echoed in her ears, Riley felt the weight of the galaxy's gaze upon her. It wasn't just the Essejar Empire that would be watching. It was every species in the galaxy. An interstellar power shift had begun, and humanity's place in it was no longer in doubt. But now, a new challenge was emerging, one that went beyond tournaments and trials. The real test of humanity's strength was yet to come. And this time, it wouldn't just be about survival. It would be about defining the future of the galaxy itself. Riley turned to the council, her voice firm. If this galaxy thinks humanity's victory is just a fluke, then they're about to find out just how wrong they are. The room was still, but the air crackled with a new kind of energy. A challenge had been thrown down. Riley Cross wasn't just fighting for her species' place in the stars. She was about to change the course of galactic history forever. The room was thick with tension as Riley stood before the Galactic Council, the weight of her victory now dawning on her. The cheers from the arena had faded, replaced by the uneasy silence that now hung heavy in the air. The Essejar Empire's Emperor, Itharvax, glared at her from across the room, his reptilian eyes burning with fury. But it wasn't just the Essejar Empire that was watching. Representatives from other factions, some allies and others hidden in shadows, were now eyeing humanity with renewed interest. Whether as a threat or a potential ally, no one knew. Riley crossed her arms, her posture unwavering despite the storm swirling around her. The council had already declared her the victor, but what came next was no longer about individual trials. She had proven humanity's worth, but with that came the harsh reality that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. Her actions had set off a chain of events that would reverberate through the galaxy's fragile political structure. The Essejar Empire will not accept this insult, Emperor Itharvax hissed, his voice filled with venom. Your victory is not an accomplishment. It is a declaration of war. The galaxy will see the truth. Humans are weak, and we will crush you. Riley held his gaze with a calm resolve. Then let it be war. But if you underestimate humanity's resolve again, you'll be the ones who are crushed. The Emperor growled, but he knew better than to respond rashly. He had underestimated her once, and now that mistake cost him dearly. The Essejar Empire had lost face in front of the entire galaxy. But Riley wasn't focused on him. The real challenge lay ahead. The chairwoman of the Galactic Council, an ancient being known as Lirada, stepped forward. Her voice was quiet but commanding, filled with a weight that no one could ignore. "This victory is not just about the HFY Empire," she said, her eyes narrowing as she regarded Riley. "It's about the consequences it will have on the galaxy's alliances. You've proven humanity's strength, but that also means you've become a potential target for forces who don't take kindly to disruption." Riley's brow furrowed. "I never asked for this, but I'll defend humanity with everything I have. If that means taking on the galaxy's powers, so be it." Lyretta sighed softly, almost regretfully. "You are courageous, Captain Cross. But you must understand, the stakes are much higher now. The HFY Empire isn't the only power in this galaxy. There are others who will see your rise as a threat to their own dominance. Some may see your victory as a sign of weakness in their systems, and they will try to exploit it. Others will try to destroy you." Riley nodded, the weight of Lyretta's words sinking in. She had already known that victory would attract enemies, but she hadn't considered the depth of the consequences. The galaxy wasn't simply about military might. It was a delicate web of political intrigue, old grudges, and power plays. Her actions had set that web into motion, and now she was at the center of it. One of the representatives from the Vaar dynasty, a species known for their cold, calculating nature, spoke up. "Perhaps this is the time to forge new alliances," he suggested. "Humanity may have won the tournament, but we would be foolish to disregard them as a mere anomaly. Perhaps their ingenuity could benefit us." Before anyone could respond, another voice, this time from the Krenath, a technologically advanced but isolationist species, interjected. "Alliances with humanity would be dangerous. Their rise is too unpredictable. It would be better to neutralize them before they gain too much influence." Riley listened carefully, her mind racing. The diplomatic landscape was shifting rapidly, and she needed to navigate it carefully. Humanity had just earned its place in the galaxy, but the cost of that victory was becoming clear. Enemies on all sides, and the burden of responsibility for the future of an entire species. As the council debated, Riley remained silent, her thoughts running wild. The SSR would never let this go. Others, like the Vaar, might be tempted to form alliances, but how could humanity trust anyone in such a volatile environment? The truth was undeniable. Humanity had become a player on the galactic stage, whether they were ready or not. And Riley wasn't going to back down. She had proven that she and her people could survive, and now it was time to prove they could thrive. "Perhaps," she spoke up, her voice cutting through the heated debate, "it's not just about fighting. Maybe it's time to show the galaxy that humanity doesn't just win, it leads." The room fell into silence once more, and for the first time, Riley felt a glimmer of hope. If the galaxy would not welcome humanity with open arms, then she would carve a place for them, one victory at a time. The council's chambers hummed with the tension of 100 conflicting thoughts, each representative considering their options as they watched Riley Cross stand tall at the center of it all. Humanity had earned its place at the table, but with that honor came an undeniable truth. This victory would stir up rivalries that could turn deadly if mismanaged. Riley's mind raced. The words she had spoken earlier about leading, not just surviving, lingered in the air. They had made an impact. Yet she knew words alone wouldn't secure humanity's future. The galaxy was a complex web of alliances and rivalries, each thread pulling in its own direction. If humanity was to survive, they would need allies. But equally, they would need to be prepared for the enemies lurking in the shadows. The debate raged on around her, with factions pulling in opposite directions. The Vaar dynasty, though known for their stoic and cold demeanor, seemed more open to cooperation, intrigued by the idea of using humanity's ingenuity for their own ends. Their representative, Velen, had remained quiet for most of the discussion, but now he spoke, his voice measured but intense. "Humanity's ingenuity has proven itself undeniable," Velen said, his yellow eyes glinting. "We have much to gain from an alliance. There is potential here we cannot afford to ignore." "Potential," came the sharp voice of a Kreneth representative, Lissar. Her long, silvery limbs curled in irritation. Humanity is volatile, unpredictable. Their victory was a fluke, nothing more. There is no room for such instability in our delicate balance of power. Riley stiffened but forced herself to remain calm. The Kreneth were known for their technological dominance and isolationist stance. They saw everything in terms of calculated logic, and humanity's unpredictability was a direct threat to their carefully curated control over the galaxy. Lissar's objections were expected, but it was the quiet whisper of the SHR representative that caught Riley off guard. "We are not the only ones watching you, Captain Cross," the SHR delegate, Sizoth, hissed. "The SHR Empire does not take defeat lightly. You may have won this tournament, but the war is far from over." Riley's heart skipped a beat. It had been one thing to face the wrath of the SHR Emperor in the arena, but the realization that the Empire was now shifting its focus toward her was something far more dangerous. The Emperor had sworn vengeance, and if they were setting their sights on her, humanity itself was at risk. "I'll be ready for them," Riley responded coolly, meeting Sizoth's cold gaze with her own steely resolve. "But humanity will not be intimidated. We'll make our own alliances and write our own destiny." The council room fell silent at her words. The other representatives exchanged looks, unsure whether to dismiss her defiance or acknowledge it as a challenge. In that tense moment, Riley realized just how high the stakes had become. This wasn't just about proving humanity's worth anymore. It was about survival in a galaxy that had just woken up to the human presence. The chairwoman, Loretta, finally spoke, her voice low but heavy with authority. "The galaxy is changing, Captain Cross, but it's not enough to stand firm. You must navigate the tides of diplomacy. Alliances will shift, and your enemies will be many. Trust will be hard to come by, and power plays will be made." Riley nodded, her resolve strengthening with every word. "Then I'll play their game. I'm not afraid to fight in the shadows, to use strategy where strength won't work." Loretta's ancient eyes studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Good, because in this galaxy, strength alone is never enough." As the council began to disperse, Riley walked out of the chamber with a new understanding. The battle for humanity's place among the stars was only beginning. She had won the tournament, but now she had to face the far more perilous reality of galactic politics. The SHR Empire was not going to let this go, and new factions, both friend and foe, would soon come knocking at her door. The lines were drawn, and Riley knew that every decision she made from here on out could shift the balance of power one way or the other. But she wasn't alone. Humanity had proven its strength once, and she had no intention of letting that flame burn out. It was time to build alliances, face the growing threats head-on, and forge a future that no one could predict. The galaxy had underestimated humanity before. Now, it would learn. Humanity's place among the stars was not just earned. It was unshakable. The days following the Galactic Council's session were a whirlwind of strategizing, meetings, and clandestine messages. Riley had returned to the human delegation's quarters, where her crew and advisors were working around the clock. Humanity had earned its place, but now came the real work, ensuring that place wasn't taken away. Riley sat at the head of a large table in the war room, scanning through holographic displays of various galactic sectors, trade routes, and the latest intelligence on the movements of the SHR Empire. The galaxy, once a distant and impersonal entity, now felt closer than ever. She was at the center of a storm, and every decision she made could alter the course of history. "Reports are coming in," said Lieutenant Vera, a skilled intelligence officer who had been monitoring the SHR Empire's communications. "There's a significant military buildup in the Outer Rim. They're preparing for something. It's not just retaliation, it's an invasion." Riley leaned forward, her brow furrowing as she analyzed the data. The SHR Empire wasn't just nursing its pride, it was mobilizing. Every instinct told her this wouldn't be a simple strike, but something far more dangerous. The HFY were coming for humanity, not only to punish them for their victory, but to eliminate the potential threat they represented. "We need to act fast," Riley said, her voice low but resolute. "We can't let them catch us off guard." But as her crew worked to strategize their next move, a more immediate problem loomed. Alliances. The galaxy was watching, and now Riley had to decide who to trust. The Krenath's cold calculation and isolationist tendencies made them difficult allies, but their technological prowess could prove invaluable. The Vyar dynasty, on the other hand, had already shown some interest in forging a partnership with humanity, but their motives remained unclear. Could they be trusted, or were they simply waiting to use humanity for their own ends? "Let's test the waters with the Vyar," Riley decided. "They're intrigued, but we need to know if their interest is genuine. I want to arrange a meeting with Velen." "I'll get it set up," Vera replied, already pulling up a secure communication channel to the Vyar representative. As the days passed, tension continued to rise. Riley knew the Vyar weren't the only ones watching. The other factions were all making their own moves, sensing that the galaxy was on the brink of something major. Humanity was a rising power, and whether they stood with Riley or against her, they would have to be dealt with. One morning, as Riley walked through the corridors of the human delegation, she was approached by a familiar face, General Thane, one of the most respected military leaders in the human fleet. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, people listened. "Captain," Thane said, his voice gravelly, "the HFY are not going to just back off. We've done the math. If they move on us, it'll be a full-scale war, but we've got an edge now. We know the terrain, and we've got the technology. If we strike first, we might stand a chance." Riley nodded slowly, considering his words. War wasn't something she wanted, but it was clear now that the HFY wouldn't let this go. Humanity's presence had already shaken the galaxy's power balance, and the Empire's pride would not allow it to remain unchallenged. "We'll hold off for now," she said, her voice firm. "But we'll be ready, and we'll make sure every ally we can secure is firmly on our side. We'll need more than just strength to win this fight. We'll need strategy, unity, and the will to do whatever it takes." With her resolve solidified, Riley turned her attention back to the galaxy's political landscape. The HFY Empire was still reeling, but its retaliation would come. The Vyar dynasty could be a valuable ally, but only time would tell if their intentions were truly aligned with humanity's interests. The Krenath remained a distant and calculating threat, their aloofness both a danger and a potential asset. And beyond that, other factions, some friendly, others far more dangerous, were waiting to make their move. As the storm clouds gathered on the horizon, Riley knew one thing for certain. Humanity's future had already been decided. They would not simply survive. They would carve their place in the galaxy, no matter the cost.